Seoul will announce its solution to compensating Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor in the coming hours. Chances are high that the compensation will be done through a government foundation, not the Japanese firms responsible. China sets its growth rate at around 5% for 2023, a record low target. Why such a moderate target? Our on-point has the analysis. K-entertainment and K-content brought home record-high earnings in 2022 on the back of the growing popularity of K-pop and the rise of K-dramas on online streaming services. In just a few hours, South Korea will announce the details of how it will address the issue of compensating Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor. Now, chances are high it'll be done through a government foundation, not the Japanese firms responsible. Our Han Sung-woo starts us off this morning.
The South Korean government is set to officially announce the details of how it will settle the issue of compensation for the Korean victims of Japan's forced labor during World War II. Foreign Minister Park Jin is expected to explain on Monday how Seoul plans to do that through funds procured through a third party, the Foundation for Victims of Forced Mobilization by Imperial Japan. But this proposal has been met with protests from the victims, who have accused the government of exempting Japan from its responsibilities. This will come over 4 years after the Korean Supreme Court, in 2 landmark rulings, ordered 2 Japanese companies, Nippon Steel and Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, to individually compensate the victims. Despite repeated requests over the years, however, Japan has reportedly refused to make contributions to the foundation, insisting all matters were settled under the 1965 treaty that normalized bilateral ties. Korean businesses that were beneficiaries of the 1965 treaty are likely to contribute instead. Seoul has left the doors open, though, for Japanese corporations to take part in the future. According to sources, South Korea and Japan have also tentatively agreed to create a future youth fund, jointly formed by the Federation of Korean Industries and the Japan Business Federation, to sponsor scholarships for students as part of a bigger bilateral deal on settling the compensation issue. The latest efforts come amid the Yoon administration's push to mend relations with Japan after 4 years of diplomatic tensions. The announcement comes amid the possibility of a summit between Yoon and Kishida later this month. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
South Korea's National Security Advisor Kim SungHan is in Washington to discuss the details of a potential visit to the U.S. by President Yoon, as well as pending issues regarding the semiconductor supply chain. Speaking to reporters at Dallas International Airport on Sunday, Kim said he'll discuss the U.S. CHIPS Act, which pundits say will negatively impact South Korean semiconductor companies. During his 5-day visit, he is set to meet with his U.S. counterpart and discuss substantial ways to strengthen the South Korea-U.S. alliance, including ways to counter increasing threats from North Korea. He also noted that Washington is closely following the issue of compensating Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor, and that a new era of Seoul-Tokyo ties will upgrade the trilateral security cooperation. China has set a modest growth rate for this year in the 5% range. That's a record low target. The National People's Congress will also address the major agenda item on Friday, where President Xi Jinping's unprecedented third term in office is set to be formalized. Our Lee Kyung-eun has the details.
China's President Xi Jinping and top officials of the Chinese Communist Party walking into the Great Hall of People in Beijing. The annual National People's Congress kicked off on Sunday, where officials are poised to declare key policies, President Xi's unprecedented third term, and a leadership shakeup. In his final work report, outgoing Premier Li Keqiang stressed the need for economic recovery, expanding consumption and creating jobs, while setting a modest growth projection for this year.
The main projected targets for development this year are as follows: GDP growth of around 5%, around 12 million new urban jobs, a surveyed urban unemployment rate of around 5.5%.
The growth target marks the lowest figure set by China since 1991, when the goal was 4.5%. This comes after the country's growth fell to 3% in 2022 against a projection of 5.5%. Despite seemingly slowing growth, China is to increase defense spending this year by 7.2% to staggering $230 billion. That aligns with President Xi's thoughts on enhanced military governance.
We should fully implement President Xi's thinking on strengthening the military and the military strategy for the new era.
The parliament session runs parallel to the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, which together make up the country's biggest annual political event, dubbed the Two Sessions. They usually last 1 or 2 weeks. The biggest item on the agenda is set for Friday. The Congress will vote on President Xi's third term, with all eyes on whether he can secure unanimous consent. The next day, Li Chang, the second most powerful person in the party and a close ally of Xi, is due to be confirmed as China's new premier. Yoon, Arirang News.
As our Lee Kyung-eun just reported, China has set a GDP target of around 5% for the year. That's a pretty conservative, but also a rather moderate target as the country transitions to life post-pandemic. For more, we turn to Professor Joseph Mahoney from East China Normal University in Shanghai. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Let's jump right into it. So why such a slow growth target at around 5%? Is it because of a weaker external markets, or could it be lingering concerns over coronavirus?
Well, this is a year of recovery with uneven growth expected. First, the aftershocks of COVID optimization will impact first quarter growth due to last year's pressures, the surge in cases we saw after controls were loosened in December, and the chance that we might see another disruptive wave in a month or two. Second, we saw a lot of encouraging numbers related to travel and spending during the Lunar New Year. But was this due to pent-up demand as well as unexpected opportunities for holiday-related travel? If so, then are these increases sustainable? Third, we know that government policies are likely to emphasize leading economic areas that can be stimulated most directly to achieve the biggest contributions to the economy. So we might see high rates of growth in places like Shanghai, Shenzhen, Beijing, and so on, but perhaps much lower elsewhere. Now, the goal this year is to recover as much as possible with the objective of laying a better foundation for a deeper recovery in 2024, which is to say Beijing will resist overly loose fiscal and monetary policies that could lead to unsustainable growth, new bubbles, or inflation. Now, I won't be surprised if we see cities like Shanghai, for example, topping 8% growth, but the national level closer to half that, but perhaps as high as 5.5%.
Mm-hmm. So considering internal situations in the country, it could be rather a fair target.
I think so. I think it's a relatively modest growth target by Chinese standards, certainly. But it's what we've heard echoed by leading international economists. And it does seem like a reasonable, achievable target, but perhaps even one that can be exceeded a bit if there are no new major problems.
Right. And also another notable from the sessions is China's annual military budget, which will go up 7.2% to over $220 billion. Now, what's behind the move?
Well, the increases bring it to just over a quarter of the U.S. defense budget, and recalling that a greater percentage of American military spending is now being directed against China in tandem with broader American efforts to leverage allies into a bloc against China. So with this in mind, let's recall that Japan raised its 2023 budget, military budget by 20%, and South Korea saw increases around 5%. Consequently, I think China's increases are in line with these new challenges, including growing concerns that the United States is already positioning for an eventual military conflict. Now, we know that more provocations are expected this year from the U.S., and more likely to come over the next 2 years as China has become the hot button issue in U.S. domestic politics. Now, in terms of China's domestic politics, conservative, nationalist-oriented voices, one of the most powerful constituencies in China, are endorsing this hike as reasonable and restrained. And no doubt leaders had their opinions in mind as well when they crafted this policy. At the same time, state media is emphasizing that this increase is yet another of a long line of single-digit percentage increases, and therefore should not signal alarm to anyone, despite outpacing the GDP growth target.
Right. And while unveiling its priorities for economic policy, the meeting also noted the upcoming change in the central government leadership, which is highly likely to consolidate the leader Xi Jinping's power, right? And how will Xi be able to make his leadership even firmer? Any notable changes in leadership we should pay extra attention to?
In fact, this is the first time we'll see a full slate of top officials who are primarily loyal to Xi and not previous leaders. So we might expect greater trust, coordination, and implementation of policymaking at the national level. However, despite their loyalty, these are not yes men. They're all heavy hitters with deep political experience and their own broad constituencies. They're likely to shake up lagging reform efforts, and we'll probably see bolder policymaking to come. Now, history shows us that the party is bigger than the man and the nation is bigger than the party. If the man, in this case Xi Jinping, sufficiently serves the party, then he keeps power. If the party sufficiently serves the nation, then it keeps power. And no one understands this better than Xi Jinping and the senior leadership. Now, finally, in addition to Xi, the man to watch obviously is Li Qiang and the state council that forms around his premiership. Unlike outgoing Premier Li Keqiang, it's said that President Xi has complete confidence in Li Qiang, so we can expect less ad hoc small group leadership and a more fully empowered state council. Now, there are already reports that Li Qiang was instrumental in the decision to fast exit China's dynamic COVID-0 policies late last year, outflanking those who advocated a more conservative approach. If this is true, then it not only appears to have been the right decision, it also indicates the amount of power he is already wielding after the CPC National Congress last year is considerable, and that we can expect a lot more to come. Now, we believe that this year's economic recovery efforts are expected, as I said, to be led by major cities, which is sensible. And Li Qiang's former role as the head of Shanghai will no doubt be an asset here. The question, however, that needs to be answered is whether rural revitalization efforts will be neglected with Li Keqiang out of the picture. Now, Li Keqiang was the last scion of the Tuanpai faction of Hu Jintao, with its power base in the rural areas, long in a political contest with the major cities on the coast. So we'll have to watch carefully to see how rural policymaking might be impacted this year and the next, and what this portends for national development strategies.
Right. It's no doubt that Xi Jinping will consolidate his power even firmer this year. But let's see on Friday if the vote will be unanimously adopted. All right. Thank you, Dr. Mahoney, for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks to the continuing popularity of K-pop stars and the rise of K-dramas on various online streaming services, K-entertainment and K-content brought home record-high earnings last year. And this could be just the beginning. Our Lee Seung-ja has more.
From BTS to Blackpink on the K-pop scene, and K-dramas like Extraordinary Eternal Woo and Squid Games, Korea's cultural content has been receiving a ton of love from fans and viewers worldwide. And thanks to this, the Bank of Korea announced Monday that earnings for all Korean entertainment content in 2022 came to $1.72 billion, up 47.9% from the previous year, setting a new record. On the other hand, South Korea's imports of similar content came to just $467 million, up just 9.7% from 2021. This means South Korea also saw a record trade surplus in the entertainment content sector, coming in at $1.23 billion. The South Korean entertainment industry has seen a steady increase in earnings since 2014, when it recorded an $80 million profit that rose to $245 million in 2015 and $520 million in 2016, thanks to the Korean wave boom in Southeast Asia and China. However, from 2017 to 2020, the industry saw a dip in profits as China boycotted Korean cultural content in response to the deployment of the THAAD system in South Korea. But thanks to the rise of OTT platforms and the power of social media, the K-content industry saw a huge surge in 2021 and 2022. And seeing the profitability, Netflix has continued to increase the number of Korean shows it plans to release on its platform, announcing plans for 34 shows in 2023 after releasing 25 in 2022. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea's Air Force display team has bagged the top prize at a major international air show in Australia. The Air Force on Sunday said its Black Eagles aerobatic team made history by becoming the first winners of the air show's top award, known as Best Overall Display. Streaking red and blue across the sky, the team performed 24 highly skilled aerial maneuvers and wowed the audience. This is the team's first time participating in the Australian show, but it's their second year in a row that the team's elite performance has snagged a top award at an international air show. Taking off from Australia's Avalon Airport on Wednesday, the team will pass through 3 countries, including Indonesia and the Philippines, before finally returning home next Monday. Recurring acute myeloid leukemia is one of the most difficult kinds of leukemia to cure. With no effective treatment until now, hopes of curing the disease are high again with a Korean bio company's newly developed technology. Our Yoon has the story.
Leukemia is a cancer of the body's blood-forming tissues, and more than half of the leukemia patients in South Korea suffer from recurring acute myeloid leukemia, or AML. Unfortunately, the number of patients with this disease is growing every year, yet the only available treatment has been anti-cancer drugs that are toxic to the body or bone marrow transplants. And for some, these treatments don't always work.
There are more cases where the disease is not completely cured. Patients experience a relapse in under a year, so there really isn't an effective treatment.
But now a South Korean bio company has successfully developed a cell therapy method for this disease using immune cells that already exist in the human body. The function of these natural killer cells, also called NK cells, specifically target cancer cells. It has been difficult to mass produce these NK cells, but the bio company has found a way to multiply the production of these cells tenfold. What's unique about their method is that they've moved away from the existing method of separating NK cells from the blood, which results in great losses in the process, only making use of 10% of the blood cells. Instead of separating the NK cells, the bio company separates other cells, reducing the actual NK cells in the blood that are sacrificed. On this foundation, the bio company has conducted 4 rounds of clinical tests so far in collaboration with the Seoul Asan Medical Center.
We've conducted the clinical test on 140 patients. The results so far are very good. Cases of relapse have been reduced to about half, and the rates of survival have doubled.
One of the greatest advantages of this NK cell therapy is that it is not as toxic as the existing chemical anti-cancer drugs. Researchers are now aiming to carry out phase 2 of clinical trials in the first half of this year, and the medical community is expecting this new NK cell therapy to have wider use in treatment beyond acute myeloid leukemia. Yoon, Arirang News.
Now for a look at the news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley joining us here in the studio. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, Dami.
Let's start in Malaysia this morning, where rescue efforts are still underway amid seasonal flooding over the weekend.
Well, that's right. At least 4 people have been killed in flooding in the country's southern state of Johor. Now, the flooding has also displaced some 40,000 people who have been relocated to schools, community centers and relief shelters. Residents have also been cautioned against waterborne diseases. The floods come as a result of record monsoon rains, as the region was hit by its highest rainfall for a 4-day period since 1991. Floods have also affected other less populated regions, prompting further evacuations. Malaysia's monsoon typically starts in October and ends in March. but experts say the wet weather could last until April. Over in Bangladesh, some 12,000 Rohingya refugees have been left homeless after a fire tore through a refugee camp. Now, the fire broke out at the crowded Cox's Bazar camp on Sunday local time, destroying some 2,000 shelters, including 35 mosques and 21 learning centers. Local hospitals, water centers and testing facilities were also affected. No casualties have been reported, and the cause of the blaze is being investigated. Fires are not uncommon in such camps, with the Bangladesh Defense Ministry reporting 222 fires in Rohingya camps in 2021 and 2022. Most Rohingya refugees staying in Bangladesh have escaped Myanmar after a military crackdown against the Rohingya ethnic minority. Meanwhile, at the United Nations headquarters in New York, representatives from over 100 countries agreed to a landmark pact that aims to conserve and revive marine biodiversity and protect the world's oceans. The agreement was made on Saturday after 2 weeks of talks. Called the High Seas Treaty, the pact aims to turn 30% of international seas into protected areas by 2030. Under the agreement, international waters in these protected areas will have limits on the amount of fishing allowed, shipping lane routes and deep-sea mining activities. The deal has required over 10 years of negotiations, with talks repeatedly stalled over the issues of funding and fishing rights. And finally, renowned architect Rafael Viñoly has died at the age of 78. Known for his unique designs, the New York-based architect was responsible for the creation of over 600 buildings around the world. Among some of his most famous designs is the iconic Jongrol Tower in Seoul. But some designs have sparked controversy, including London's walkie-talkie building, which initially reflected enough sunlight to melt car parts. The architect was also sued by tenants in a Manhattan residential building over creaks and banging noises. Born in Uruguay, Viñoly moved to the Big Apple in 1978, where he founded Rafael Viñoly Architects, a firm with offices in Palo Alto, London, Manchester, Abu Dhabi and Buenos Aires.
Good morning. Today marks the third spring term. 경칩, hibernating animals wake up around this time, and they might think they have woken up too late with much warmer than average spring temperatures today. Afternoon highs will be about 7 to 9 degrees higher than season norms, reaching up to 16 degrees here in the capital and 20 degrees over in Daegu. But of course, it's that very unwelcome dust level which will be high all day in central regions, 전라북도 and Gwangju, while an ultrafine dust advisory could be issued during the day. And dryness in the air continues as well. East of Gangwon province is under a dry weather warning, with wind expected to pick up in that area, increasing the risk of fire. Yesterday, many parts saw the warmest temperatures of the season so far, and it could be warmer today. Gwangju topping out at 19 degrees Celsius, and Gangneung in Gangwon province will see a high of 21 degrees. The warming trend continues throughout the week, with spotty rain in the forecast tomorrow at dawn in Gyeonggi-do and Chungcheong-do provinces. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. Do stay with us for more updates throughout the day. Thanks for watching.